Kelly, and this is When the Stars Aligned, a channel dedicated to your radical liberation of your authentic expression and your soulful purpose in life through working with various astrological and metaphysical tools like human design, astrology, intuitive arts, and moving through this world in an embodied way with somatic work, with archetypal energetics, all that good stuff is my kind of jam. So welcome back, and I wanted to do a story time version of a video today about astrocartography. So I've done a lot of astrocartography readings these last few years. I myself had my first astrocartography reading, I believe it was 2015 or 16, and I was living in Melbourne, Australia at the time, and a partner at the time kind of gifted me this reading. And I remember being amazed by the art of astrocartography, which essentially is called locational astrology. And it's tracking the unique relationship you have to different places on the planet based on your birth chart, your astrological birth chart. So it shows you different lines, different signs, different planetary influences that are running through different parts of the world to varying degrees based on the unique coordinates of your chart. And I was in a time in my life when I got that reading where I was going through a really intense period of like birthing the entrepreneur in me, and I had a lot of resistance to it. It was really hard for me to be very disciplined in the discomfort. I'm good at discipline in some ways, but at that time of my life, everything that had to do with business or finances or scheduling was so foreign to me. And it was a real crunch in learning how to do that. And I remember getting this reading, and the woman was telling me about various places, and it stuck with me, and it planted a seed. And I knew, because I had already been mentoring in an astrology mentorship, a year-long astrology mentorship with an incredible, phenomenal astrologer who was a mentor in my life for a while. So I was already deep in the art of astrology and learning how to step forward more in that field as a coach, a mentor, a guide. And I had already had my human design business rolling to an extent. It was building up. And one of the things that was the biggest takeaway for me with that reading was understanding the line that I was on when I was going through that really crunchy, intense period. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you a story time of taking you through my own experience with different line placements, because I get asked to do that a lot. So maybe it'll be helpful if you are looking at some of the lines I'm going to talk about. Then stay tuned, and perhaps it will support you on your own journey. And if you do want to have a individual reading with me where we have time one-on-one to go deep into your chart, I pick various locations that I think are really well suited for you, and then you tell me what you're really looking for, a certain amplification you would like from your environment, and I can seek those out and find them for you. So you can find that link below. And let's get into the story time. So again, when I had this reading, I was so deep in my other studies with astrology and building out my human design business, it just planted a seed. I'm like, okay, astrocartography, I'm gonna circle back to this. And then a year later, once I had gotten a little bit more steady and gotten over some of the painful growing pains of building and birthing my business initially, I circled back to astrocartography, and I started diving in deeply because I was just riveted. And one of the things that struck me the most with astrocartography was the hindsight, because before that, I had lived in a lot of different places. I left the States. I was born in Salem, Massachusetts, and I left at 18 to go on a gap year, which turned into me kind of birthing this very entrepreneurial, nomadic, spiritual journey in my life that lasted for about 10 years. And I suppose it's still going, but the flavor of it has changed slightly and matured and deepened. But I lived in a lot of places before that time. And I got to do some hindsight investigating. I got to look back at places I had lived and really do some like cross-checking of, wow, what was happening in this place when I was going through that experience, and why was I feeling all these things in the place I was born, and not in a bypassy way, but looking at the deeper energetic, right? It always comes back to self-responsibility. How are we showing up for ourselves? But there are very powerful influences at play. I do not doubt that in the slightest, and I have a lot of hindsight that it's very valid. So, first place, when I was living in Melbourne, it turned out that I was in literally like a sandwich of two lines. And if you've never seen an astrocartography chart, I'll flash a little picture here. The lines can show up in all different ways, but I had this like triangular and like pizza slice, and Melbourne was sitting right at the tip of these two lines. And what were those two lines? What are those two lines? It is Saturn and Chiron. So Saturn lines, let's talk about Saturn lines, because I also have some recent experience with the Saturn line. Saturn lines are related to Capricorn energy, and Saturn is known as the time lord. So the keeper of time. Saturn is really about discipline. Saturn cares less about things feeling good, and it cares more about things being done well, being done with integrity, being done with precision and with the end game in mind. Saturn is a huge like catalyst of restraint, and it will constrict you and restrain you so that you are not excessively dispensing your energy where you don't need to be. So if we are not used to Saturnian energy, which is like that disciplined grandfather saying, sit down, I'm going to teach you a lesson and you're going to listen to me and pay attention, and I'm going to hold you accountable, which I believe is actually such a needed quality that is essential for like growing something that is solid, true, lasting, and genuine, and like based in deep virtue. Anywho, I get long-winded with this. Saturn lines will provide you a time of refinement, and depending on how open you are to Saturnian energy, it's going to feel incredibly painful and torturous, or it's going to feel what do you call it? It will further you along. You will see the results of your effort. You will be rewarded for your effort when you put in the effort. You will get the returns on your effort, but no less than what you put in. So Saturn is really calling for discipline and accountability and putting yourself to the test and making those moves that are really important. So I had a nice little journey with Saturn for a couple of years on and off as I was living in and out of Melbourne. And I can remember some moments where I literally felt like I was being crunched under this like restrictive weight, because I by nature have quite an expansive energy, and it doesn't mean that I always feel expansive, but I have a design that wants to expand. Like I seek out expansion, and I catalyze expansion, and I'm a hunger for that. It's just like what I feel it in my body when I talk about it. It's like I'm here to know how to like fill up and expand and then come back to empty and then fill up and expand. And maybe we all are, but I just really feel that in my bones. So Saturn was really hard for me, because it was like, okay, if you want to do this is going to take some structuring, and you're going to have to learn about discipline and moving through your own blocks, and I had a lot of resistance around, talk about Saturn weeding out the weak points, right? I had a lot of weak points in my internal psyche, in my insecurity, and my limiting beliefs that were actually inhibiting me from stepping forward into this version of myself as an entrepreneur in my own kind of way. And Saturn weeded those out. It weeded out my insecurity. It weeded out the parts of me that were playing small. It weeded out the parts of me that wanted to hide my voice, and maybe parts of me that were hiding in my expansiveness and freedom that weren't actually true, right? Like, I think all things hold bits of truth, but even very true parts of us, right? Like, it can be easy to mask unconscious fears under things that seem really pretty and shiny about ourselves, right? Like, I don't know. Okay, I'm getting too deep here. Let's stay on track, Kelly. So Saturn really helped me get that discipline to weed out the parts of my insecurity that were actually unconsciously running the show and masking as like freedom and liberation. It's like, no, you need to learn how to be disciplined if you want to be financially independent and live where you want to live. Like, this is an essential part in your growth, Kelly. You can do this. This isn't going to limit you. It's a temporary limitation. So we'll talk about Saturn in that way. Saturn lines can bring temporary limitation and constriction in order to expand further if you are working with the energy. Now let's say you're on a Saturn line and you're not working with that energy. This place might just feel really heavy and dry and dense and cynical and serious and pessimistic. So if you're on a Saturn line, or if you're going to a Saturn line, let's say you're a Saturnian dominant person, like you have a lot of Capricorn in your chart. I'm a Capricorn rising, maybe you have a Capricorn rising. Visiting your Saturn lines with that intention to refine an area of your life and get to work can be very, very powerful. But if you go without one, or if you stay at one for longer than is necessary, I think it can make you quite cynical. I've experienced it can bring out this kind of like cynicism and pessimism if it's not being geared towards honorable structures and devotion. And I have, so also the Chiron line there. Chiron brings healing. The Chiron is the wounded healer, so it will often exacerbate your wounds, so that you have to really see them and look at them and bring them back into the light and come back into love and notice where you've kind of cut yourself off from God, or you've cut yourself off from receiving love because of those wounds, whether it's from yourself or from other people. So I was in a very charged place to be doing a lot of deep work. And I've also lived on another Saturn line. I didn't actually know until after, which is interesting. I just happened to visit this place. It's in California. I visited this place up in Northern California, the Sierra Nevadas, on a road trip with like a lover at the time. It was very happenstance. I didn't really know about this place beforehand. We just passed through and we stayed there for a night, and I loved it. I just loved the feel of the place. I was like, oh, this is so cute, and it's a little village, and I love it here. It's so adorable. And then flash forward a few months later, I ended up moving there. And I did look at my line beforehand because I was curious about what I was stepping into. And I didn't think too much of it because I was trusting my gut. And that's something I guide my astrocartography clients in. And if you're wondering about astrocartography and you want to have a session, I think a great first step is really trusting your gut and your instincts, right? Because we can talk about your chart, I can tell you specific locations, but I don't like to use astrology and these arts in that kind of way. I don't believe it's about manipulating circumstances. I believe it's about really trusting your gut and where you feel drawn and pulled and where you feel a strong response to be. And then utilizing the information as counseling, as guidance, as support, but not basing your choices fully off of the line, because if you do that, you're not really giving a chance for your intuition to lead the way. So I knew I wanted to be there, so I went. Lo and behold, it is a Saturn line. It's right on a Saturn line. And this specific Saturn line, because all Saturn lines are different, all of your astrocartography lines will have different aspects. Some might be similar, but you could have a positive negative line, or a positive Saturn line, or a negative Saturn line. You can have a positively aspected moon line or a negatively aspected moon line. So those are more of the fine tunings. Now this Saturn line was less about constriction, and it was more about going really internal and utilizing the time in that space to do deep inner reflection and to kind of like revisit old wounds, which was interesting because I really love this town and I have such a strong rapport for this place and gratitude for this place. But I've noticed in the 2 times I lived there, I do hit this kind of quota where I'm like, I love it here, but it pulls me so internal, and I can combat it and fight against it and put myself out there, but it has this kind of like interesting energetic that doesn't quite translate. It's like when I'm there, it's my time to be very in my own process and connected to myself and deep and in and like soul seeking, like deep in the hermit cave, which I'm a 6'2", Capricorn rising. I'm good at being the hermit. I'm a little too good at being the hermit sometimes. So it's a place I've learned to temper. It's like, okay, I can love this place to a certain measure and in my own kind of way. But for long-term living, it's not really the best fit. It's good if I need some recharging, soul searching, but it's not the place that really enhances and amplifies the essence perhaps that I'm wanting to step into more. So Saturn lines. Other lines I've had experiences living on or visiting are moon lines. Now, a little side sneak tip. I tell this to people in the sessions, but I'm going to say it here. If you're wondering where is a place that can really feel amazing to live, and of course, if you naturally are also drawn to this place, if you like it, if you feel a resonance with this place, is the moon line. Moon lines are my favorite lines to suggest to people because they feel like home. The moon is Cancer, right? Cancer rules over the moon. Cancer is the fourth house. The fourth house is about home, your kin, your family, your sense of safety and belonging. And moon lines just feel like this hug, this warm hug. I have experienced, and from hundreds of people who I've worked with have experienced, the moon line can feel very much like home. And I have a few moon lines I've been on. I think the first moon line I ever experienced was Greece, which is interesting because as a little girl, I think I was 4 years old, and I've heard stories from my aunt, who I was very close with growing up. She's like, you used to always talk about Greece. She's like, I didn't know if you had a past life there or something, but she's like, you were 4 and you were writing these stories about Greece and the goddesses and the gods and the mythology. She's like, you just loved Greece and you always wanted to go there. And I do believe that we can carry memories from previous lifetimes or perhaps even current lifetimes, and we have a sense of like a future timeline that's coming our way. But I knew from a young age that I just wanted to go to Greece one day. Or even if I didn't go, I just loved Greece and the mythology and the history and the land and the ocean and the Mediterranean and the way of life and the people, and just so drawn. And I got an opportunity, this is before I knew about astrocartography, I got an opportunity to go to Greece after doing a traveling nanny gig with a family who's very dear to my heart. I used to nanny for them a lot, help raise one of their babies, and they were going on a trip to Morocco, and they asked me to come and help out. So I went, and then after Morocco, I ended up going to Greece for a little bit on my own and seeing a long lost friend and having a great time. And the way I felt in Greece was literally like coming home to my own soul. I even had these very powerful experiences at some of the temples, at the Oracle of Delphi, where I had this like, I don't know what to call it, like, I don't know how I feel about the term awakening. Like, everyone's like, oh, my spiritual awakening was at this time. I think that, I don't know, I have different perspectives on that, but something stirred into deeper activity, into more prominent activity when I was in Greece. A part of my consciousness came more online. I was getting these like prophecies when I was sitting in the temples. I was just like hearing and feeling and receiving so much information. Again, story for another time. This is gonna be a long video. I felt so at home there. Even the way I interacted with the people and the way I was being received and the kind of conversations I was having, I changed physically. I remember I came home after, and my partner at the time, he was like, whoa, what happened to you in Greece? Like, you're a goddess. I just, something in my like soma, in my cells and my psyche shifted. And I think it's because I tapped on this deep sense of being at home. I don't even know what it is. I don't need to know what it is, but I really resonated with that land on a heart, body level, and felt like home, felt very like home. Another moon line I've lived on is going through San Diego. So I moved to San Diego in the fall of 2020, and I lived there for until June of 2021, so less than a year. But my time that I was there, I did have a very strong sense of at-homeness. I met community very easily. I felt very loved and seen by the people in my circle, by people I met. I felt really loved. Let's just put it that way. And I think that is a great indicator of a moon line. It's like you feel like you belong. You feel a sense of belonging, and not on like a superficial ego level, like, oh, you're like part of the party, you're part of the team, but just my heart felt very loved, and I felt very seen by the people there. And I made some really great friends who I felt like they saw me as family, and it was comforting. It was very comforting and very soothing and very nurturing energy there for me. So those are my moon lines. What other lines do I want to talk about? I'm like, how long is this video gonna be? Have a sip of cacao. I'll talk about sun lines. I had some very powerful experiences on sun lines. Maybe just one sun line, actually. This is a pretty big one. So sun lines, what I tell people in astrocartography, are great places where you can become more self-aware. These places are going to illuminate your authentic self while simultaneously illuminating whatever is not authentic or rooted in truth or rooted in integrity or rooted in the honest expression of who you are. And when I moved to my sun line, I'm not going to tell this story now. The story deserves a book. I've got some books in the works. When I moved to my sun line in it was 2019, I had a life-changing shift in directions of my life. Let's just say a lot changed in 2019. And I'm not saying it was just because I was living on my sun line. I actually received some downloads when I was in Greece, that there were going to be some big changes on the horizon. And then I went to Mexico for a conference, and I knew a lot was changing in my life, and I didn't really know what that was going to look like. And then living in Colorado, where I was on my sun line, a lot ensued. A lot of transformation and change ensued. And some of it was glorious. It was like, wow, I have never felt this like myself. I have never felt this like true to myself, or like standing in the light of my own sun. Like, this is me. And there were simultaneous erosions of parts of my life, elements of my life, parts of my psyche, my relationship life that was undergoing a huge death and rebirth process. Mostly death at that time. And it's not even like the things that were falling away weren't true or based in truth. It's just that they had changed. The truth was, things had changed, and I couldn't hide from that truth. And to be honest, it was a truth that I was hiding from for like a couple years. I was hiding from some truths of my core expression as a woman, my sensuality, my desires in my life, my desires in my relationship, that I kept suppressing or wronging myself for. And when I was on my sun line, it's like there was this amplification of stand in the light of who you really are, and if things have to change, they're going to change. And it's not going to be comfortable, and it's going to be painful. You might be demonized for it. You might not understand what's happening. You might not recognize yourself on the other side of it, but these are things that need to transform, and they need to go through a death process. And I gave up to that. I gave myself to that. I remember during that time of my life, I kept hearing the mantra in my head of like, I'm laying this all on the altar of divinity. I'm laying this all on the altar of divinity. That was my mantra at that time in 2019. So I did. I laid it at the altar. A lot changed, a lot opened, and a lot changed again. But I was not the same coming out the other side of that. And it kind of rebirthed or birthed me into this new identity of Kelly, this next version of Kelly on my journey as a soul evolving on this planet. So the sun line was potent for me and brought a lot of clarity and a lot of illumination, but also shed light on the things that were no longer true or able to stay as they were. So sun lines are very powerful as well. If you are wanting to step more into like the truth of who you be and owning your authentic expression, sun lines, damn. I think I'm gonna leave that here for now. Trying to think of any other ones. My birth line is interesting, and I'm currently visiting my birth lands, my birth soils. I was born on a Neptune line, which is interesting. I am quite Neptunian. I'm a bit of a shapeshifter. I have Neptune in my first house, Uranus in my first house. I also have Saturn in Pisces. So there's like a very strong, even though it's not essentially maybe what first comes off in my own awareness of self, I think more like Capricorn, Scorpio, Libra, or Aquarius. Neptune does play a really big part in my chart and in my expression. And it's something that has been challenging for me to like learn how to own and embrace. It's something that I've judged myself a lot for and have felt judged by other people's perceptions of, and have let myself care way too much about other people's understanding or lack thereof of this quality in me, this Piscean, Neptunian, kind of like ephemeral, shape-shifting, consciousness hopping like dimension of self. I used to have a really strong fear and tried to combat it because I didn't want people to think I was unstable or flaky or whatever. And it's like, it's taken me a while to learn that that's part of my identity, and it's not the unsteady and flaky, but like this shape-shifting, non-linear expression that has a fluidity and formlessness that can take shape and form, but it's my artist. My artist is fueled by that shapeshifter. And I've learned to find healthy ways to express her and to also love that part of me and own that part of me and not shame that part of me and build my life in such a way that it supports that part of me. But I was born on a Neptune line, so that always brings up a lot for me when I revisit home. Is like, I can be aware of, I get so open on these, it's like I'm talking so much about these deep concepts. I'm really curious if anyone has like stayed till the end of this, because if you have, we'd probably be really good friends. When I'm on my Neptune line, I can be aware of like hundreds of coexisting parallel realities at once. And it's almost like I'm putting my hand in a bag and like pulling out a color of like, oh, let's try on that expression. Wow, I can really feel that emotion now. And it's very destabilizing. But when I bring some practical like Capricorn rising structure into it, be like, okay, I really want to like get these things done on my business. What kind of like hat can I put on? Okay, I really want to like tend to my friendships and relationships. Okay, what hat can I put on? Okay, I'm getting a little dense and stuck in my fears and insecurities. What hat can I put on? It's like playing with consciousness. And it's really good when I'm here to just let myself be and let myself not be super productive oriented or think I need to be achieving and perfecting myself and excelling and doing better at all these things I've done really bad at. It's like my Capricorn like quiets down a little bit, or gets the invitation to quiet down and be like, okay, just be, feel, create, nourish, feel into what you want, move forward. So Neptune lines, again, they have different aspects, tend to bring out more of like a creative, lucid, intuitive, extrasensory part of us that can be really great for spiritual practice, for meditation, for therapeutic practices, for healing, for nourishing your body, for imagination, for dreaming up the next step in your life. Yeah, so I'm gonna cut it here. I'm gonna close this video up. I am really impressed if you made it to the end of this video of me talking about all of my experiences on different astrological lines. And I would love to hear if you have any takeaways, if you have any lines in mind that you're going to be visiting. And yeah, catch you on the next video. Okay.